Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Strength and Hormones podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Papanos. Today, I'm joined with Dr. Todd Watts. He is an expert in all things parasites and cellular health, and I'm so excited to have him on today because we're going to be talking about really everything that you need to know about parasites that can live in a bunch of different places of our body and things like mold and mycotoxins. We had a conversation about mold. I believe it was in season 1 or 2 that you can go back to if you need a little bit of foundational information about how mold impacts things like our gut health. But today we're going to go much more into the weeds on how all this impacts us on a more cellular and hormonal basis. So welcome, Dr. Todd. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Wonderful. Maybe you can just start off and give us a brief introduction into yourself and how you got into specializing, I suppose, in parasites and kind of what you do today.
So, as I went back to school when I was 41 to get my doctorate, and came out at 45, and started to practice, and been practicing for the last 10 years. And in that process, I had some of my own health issues in my 40s, and that's where I struggled with Lyme disease issues, and then from coming from that, figuring out, hey, as I got into my journey, what am I missing here? Why am I cycling with Lyme issues? And I had Epstein-Barr virus. And with that process, I learned about parasites and the major role it takes on the immune system. And then as I treated parasites, I stopped cycling with my symptoms with the Lyme. And then from there, I got rid of my allergies, my headaches, my fatigue for the most part went away, my general fatigue. And then just a lot of even my wrist pain went away from, dealing with and addressing parasitic infections. So that was where, at the time, look at 10 years ago, most people didn't really know about parasites, and the impact it really made on people's health. And I had to learn that for myself as I was working through my own health journey, and then working with hundreds and thousands of people over the years on their health journeys. And so that's where I come from. It's that background of trying to figure out myself, but also trying to figure out so many patients at the same time, and working with people from all over the United States, some in Canada, Europe, South America, and even in Asia that I had clients over in those directions as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think that whenever we've gone through some of the challenges ourselves, it really helps cement, our abilities as a practitioner. I know that my own personal journey is part of my own, practitioner journey as well. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I also think that a lot of what you do is really uncovering these like hidden mysteries of chronic health problems, right? That maybe aren't so obvious to the naked eye that are happening. And parasites and things like mycotoxins are definitely two of those that are some of these mystery root causes, if you will, when it comes to chronic diseases and chronic symptoms that individuals experience. So maybe we can just start off with the parasite front. And could you just give us an introduction to what even are parasites? Where are they found? How are they impacting our health?
Yeah, so parasites is a very broad category, meaning that there's multiple classifications within that. The four classifications there are protozoans, which are microscopic parasites, means that you can see them under the microscope. They're not seen by the naked eye. About 70% of parasites are in that category. They can affect the body systemically, meaning that because they could be red blood cell parasites, they could be within the lymphatic system, they can go anywhere in the body. Then the other categories are cestodes, which are tapeworms. So that's where you have your dog tapeworm, your beef, pork, fish tapeworms, your dwarf tapeworm. Those are some of the main ones that people are familiar with. And then there's the trematodes, and the trematodes classification is where you have your flukes. So liver flukes, pancreatic flukes, lung flukes, blood flukes, and there again, they can go, especially the blood flukes, really anywhere in the body. And then there's the nematodes. So the nematodes are what most people are probably aware of as the pinworms, roundworms, threadworms, hookworms, whipworms. So those, there again, can be in a variety of locations in the body, most commonly the GI system. But there's like the threadworms, which are more commonly in the upper GI. and have its whole life cycle within the lungs, and it can get it easily into the sinuses. And a lot of those have the cycle that go into where they develop in the lungs and then back down during the full moon time down into the GI system and become the adult stage from a larval stage. And anyhow, they create a lot of disruption. You see some common symptoms with those are seasonal allergies, headaches. Most common cause of headaches are strongyloides or threadworm, eczema, skin conditions that are caused probably a lot by the roundworms in the research shows that. So those are the main classifications of parasites, and they can be found anywhere in the body, including in the brain with neurocysticercosis, which is a tapeworm, a pork tapeworm, that the cyst can get into the brain and then eventually develop.
Yikes. Okay. So there's so many different types, it sounds like, and they can really wreak havoc in so many different organs and areas of the body. How do people get parasites? Is it just through that fecal oral exposure and eating foods that are contaminated?
So those are really a very common way of doing it, especially as you're traveling. So, I grew up in San Diego, and they say, "Oh, you go across to Mexico, don't drink the water, right? Because the water isn't going through the same filtration systems that we do in the U.S." I lived in South America in Argentina for a couple of years. Same thing there. We'd boil our water, we'd strain our water, and we put drops in it to help to purify it. And but there's other ways of getting parasites. One is just being around your animals and being in an environment of that. You can walk barefoot in the ground in the soil, and there's certain parasites that exist in the soil, like threadworms, and it can penetrate through the skin. There are some parasites that it could be in a lake where it's kind of like towards the end of the summer and it's nasty, and they can go through and they penetrate in through the skin and then get into the body that way. Then there's some that are introduced into the body through a mosquito bite, through a flea bite, through a spider bite, through a tick bite. So the insects are a big vector of how we can get parasites, especially protozoans, but also even other ones such as nematodes, especially. But I found it with some of my patients where it's been in their water supply. And literally, I'm like, wow, municipality water, they tested it, had nematode larvae in it. And then they had some of their neighbors' water tested, same thing. So it was one of those things that I was a little bit shocked that could happen. But there again, those parts of the different phases of the development of parasites are microscopic and very, very small, which is why they can infiltrate the body and then from there mature.
Yeah, and I think that the general conventional thought process on parasites is that they're a bit ubiquitous and everyone has them, so there's no reason to worry. But as we know, that's maybe not the case, right? And they can wreak havoc on a lot of different health conditions and symptoms that individuals might be experiencing or why they're not getting better. Why is that the general consensus? Is there a reason why people are told that they're ubiquitous, don't even worry about it?
I think it goes back to even the told that they don't even exist in the United States. So Western medicine says that you just don't have parasites because you can't get them here, which is ridiculous. We're a terrain, we're a living microbe, and we get exposed to everything. Then there's the other phase of what you're talking about, where like, oh, they're important, they're just part of our microbiome. Yes, they are. They are, and they can play a role, but our bodies can get overburdened with them, and then it affects our immune system, which then suppresses and then creates all these other symptoms. And when they build up in overabundance, then they also produce a lot of byproduct or toxicity of biotoxin that affects our body as well. And then that creates, an upregulation of IgE, which then can create food allergies, seasonal allergies. And then there's other things that create a toxin that affects and creates headaches. And then other toxins can cause joint pain. And so the consensus of, just take a probiotic and it'll even it all out is not necessarily the case that I have found in these chronic cases of working with really sick people and also just even healthy people. And the thing is we're never going to get rid of all of them. We just need to knock them back and get our immune system up to par, because what's happened is our immune system has been highly affected by all these toxins in our environment to where it can't necessarily handle exposures as much as we used to be able to.
Sure. Yeah. And how are they, on a symptom perspective, how are they affecting individuals? You mentioned a few different types of parasites, but maybe if you could just give us a couple of different body systems and what some of those classical symptoms look like that you see.
So let's look at a protozoan. It's a microscopic parasite that's commonly found with Lyme disease. It's called Babesia. So Babesia can create some really tension, a lot of tension in the suboccipital region of your neck. So really tight up in there, constant neck pain, burning, low back pain or sacral pain is another thing I look at. Kind of heavy legs, where I feel like my legs don't recover well in workouts. I don't perform as well. Sometimes it has issues to do with heart stuff as well. Bartonella, another co-infection, can create heart palpitations, anxiety, um, lower body pain. So stuff such as the foot, where you get foot pain, knee pain, issues down in the gastroc and soleus muscles, so calf muscles. Babesia can cause, like for me, when I had that issue, my feet would just burn. It was just burning sensation in the bottom of my feet. And so as I cleared that out, then that pain went away. I'm like, oh wow, that's awesome. And then also a lot of the neck stuff went away from me as I cleared parasites. All of a sudden, all that neck tension and tightness, I was always just rubbing my shoulders. Like, oh my goodness, that was an issue. For my family, my wife has had eczema from her since she was a little girl throughout her life, off and on. And there was more stress in her life; it would be worse. And in fact, when she was pregnant, their second child, she had head to toe. And as I got into this career, and I'm like, okay, what do I need to do to figure this out? That's when I cleared parasites for them. So probably roundworm or threadworm, that resolved it. And all four of my kids have had eczema, and with learning about it and then taking them through the protocols of parasites, it's cleared it up. And I've had a lot of patients with the same thing. Little babies up to elderly that had severe skin problems that we were able to clear up through addressing parasitic infections. Headaches and migraines, that's where I struggled with that, and also fatigue. It can affect mitochondrial function in some of these nematodes and suppress Krebs cycle stuff. And then you have stuff in the Toxoplasma gondii, which, like toxoplasmosis, can get from pork or from kitty litter, changing the kitty litter from cats. And that one is a microscopic parasite, protozoan based, that can create more anxiety, inhibits GABA production, can create a little schizophrenia, OCD, more desire for risk taking, things like that. And then cestodes. So when I'm looking at tapeworms seem to really drive IgE up. And what I have found is hives, for example, a lot of times I can affiliate that towards a tapeworm, or a variety of just seasonal issues too. So that's where the food allergies can come in play, or the seasonal allergies, um, because of the upregulation of the IgE when the Th2 immune system is raised. So, by clearing that out, then I seem to have a lot more success on helping those patients get over these symptoms.
Sure. Okay. And I wanted to talk a little bit specifically too about the nasal passages and how there can be both things like parasitic infections, mycotoxins, which are these harmful spores that mold puts off, right? I want to talk just a little
Right.
bit about what's going on with the sinuses, because I feel like a lot of people experience sinus related issues, whether it's, recurrent sinus infections, congestion, seasonal allergies, upper respiratory things. So, what is the correlation between all of those?
So they're two different things, right? Parasites definitely can get up in there. We've had multiple people, practitioners, that shared pictures and some videos of some people literally pulling out worms out of their nose, 3-4 inch worms, um, and and then I've just seen tons of that. So rinsing to get that, that's part of, when they come up to get the lungs, they also can get it into the sinus cavities and make themselves at home. And that that creates more sensitivities, creates a little more brain fog, sinus congestion or not sinus congestion, just depends. and or headaches. Uh, the other thing it can affect is how often people get sick, especially in the wintertime. So if you don't have a really good clean sinuses, then people tend to have more cold flu type symptoms. Then mycotoxins from mold, as you breathe those in, those can suppress immune function and create just a lot of yucky environment in the sinuses, and then a lot of brain fog, neurological issues, and then there again, you're going to be more apt to get sick because it suppresses immune function, and therefore, uh, you can have more drainage possibly. You're going to have um, just I think more neurotransmitter problems because of the toxins that are being exposed into the nasal cavities, and then also maybe through the nerve systems there.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier about how these parasitic infections in particular can be heavily correlated with things like Lyme in your example, or some of these co-infections. What are some of the other chronic diseases that you've seen that when parasites, maybe mycotoxins as well, are eradicated, we start to see some chronic symptoms improve, or markers of chronic disease development slow?
So I think it's a big correlation with a lot of variety of things. One, let's just keep a simple one. People get these cold sores, right? So any herpes viruses, there's a big correlation in the research in regards to parasitic infections, how it affects the immune system, and then spurs the viral infection. So if you can clear the parasite, then these cycles stop. I've had a guy that had 10 years where he'd get it so bad to go from his lip all the way up through his nose to where he'd have to take work off, and none of the viral stuff really worked for him. And as we approached his case, was like, what can we do differently? Address the parasites, and I did some research and saw how that there's a major correlation with that and the immune system, and literally within 60 days cleared it out, and then he hadn't had any type of flare-ups in 4 years, which he had constant flare-ups every single year um, in that process. But really, when you get into the autoimmune diseases and neurological diseases, there could be a big correlation with the parasite infections, and as you clear that out, it can have an impact. There's studies done by a doctor that studied and researched on MS, and when he went and they studied the tissues of those that passed away on MS, in their system, in their nervous system, the spinal cord, they found in the brain nematode larvae with Lyme bacteria. So there was a big correlation with that. And then you look back at the ticks, when they studied the ticks on several different research studies, not only did they have some Lyme bacteria in their bellies, but they also had nematodes as well. And so that's where they have found that could get into the nerve system and create problems with that. So yeah, I think really when you go down to it, if you're gonna be able to fight viruses, protozoans, and bacteria that can get out of control, then you have to be sure that you're breaking the parasites down, because there's the issue between T helper 2 cells and T helper 1 cells, which is the immune system of Th1, Th2. And as Th2 is elevated, that means Th1 is suppressed, because there's specific interleukins that suppress the Th1 immune system, which is what helps guard us against viruses and bacteria and protozoans, and fights that. And that's where people in the Lyme disease world, they'll take the products for Lyme and the antibiotics, and they'll knock it down, and then it comes back again. They'll knock it down and it comes back again. And really, what they need to do, and this is where my experience came in personally, as well as a lot of patients, is as I addressed Th1, which is I cleared parasites and I brought that immune system into balance, then the body was able to then stop cycling and just keep it at bay, and really overcome those other issues.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And now that you are in that position, is this something that you are consistently supporting to be able to, I suppose, keep things under control? Or are there now better measures that you are able to take within your drinking water and food and things more preventatively to help prevent getting into that situation again?
Well, I think just in living in this world, there isn't really any foolproof way. Now, drinking water, I prefer drinking distilled water because it's the best at getting the toxins out in our environment and these sort of things, um, compared to any other method uh, of that. And then you can add minerals and electrolytes back in. But the other thing is uh, when you really come down to it, it just goes back to you just need to look at doing a protocol every so often, a couple times a year, or do full moon protocols around 5-6 days around the full moon time period. And when you're working with a lot of different herbs, a lot of them are beneficial for the microbiome as well. So it just depends which products you're using to address parasites. If you're going in and just bombing them with anti-parasitic medications, then that's when you may need to come in and support the microbiome a little deeper.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that brings up a good point too, because there's kind of two camps when it comes to detoxification, right? There's one camp of practitioners that believe that your body has its own mechanisms to be able to detoxify and you don't need to support that. You don't need to be doing anything there. Then there's the other camp, which is more, I feel, realistic, which is where I fall, which is like, okay, we probably need to clear the body initially, right, to be able to get things under control. But then there needs to be some ongoing support because our world is just too toxic with all these things that we're exposed to. And if we want to keep our symptoms under control and prevent some of these chronic things from developing, then we probably need to be having this ongoing support happening. So it sounds like that's kind of where you fall in terms of those two camps. Is that correct?
That is, it's
Yeah.
because I mean, literally, our body has the ability to do a lot of stuff, but it's never been exposed to the amount of chemicals we're spraying in our and on our foods. It's in the air, it's in the water supply, it's everywhere. And when it gets in there, it binds on into the cells and destroys it causes damage to the gut lining, and then can go more systemic and create disruptions in the hormonal systems, metabolism, enzymatic reactions within the body. Just glyphosate alone affects 291 enzymatic processes within the body. And then you get into atrazine, and it's the second most used chemical behind that glyphosate, and it's sprayed on corn, sugarcane, macadamia nuts, and it's all over our golf courses and grass and stuff. And that one, it has it's highly disruptive to our hormonal systems. In fact, it takes and converts frogs, male frogs. There's studies done that it convert male frogs into female frogs, where they're able to produce eggs and reproduce. And um, it highly affects the testosterone and levels in men and young men. Boys, I think that's an epidemic today. You see more and more young, teenagers, young adults that are low testosterone based, and it's because of these chemicals that are affecting that. And that's where it's so important to support the body to be taking the right binders that will provide nutrients as well as neutralize and clear the toxins out.
Absolutely. Okay. And you mentioned a couple of times the full moon, and I want to talk a little bit about that in terms of what's happening with the moon and parasites. What's the connection?
So during the moon cycle, what will happen is the larvae will come and as the parasites have gone through a maturing process, they'll come up through, like for example, the lungs, back in through down into the digestive system, either small intestine or large intestine, and then will become adults. And so that's where you see I've seen little kids where they're so itchy or the behavior changes. I'll tell the parents, pay attention to the full moon, and you'd be amazed that the correlation is with the symptoms during that time period. And so that's where it's important, to do some of um, the cleansing during that time period, because it's easier to get rid of them and kill them in that process as they come into the intestinal system. And then you got to be sure you're taking products that have the right herbs that will address the eggs as well, because some of these parasites are laying hundreds of thousands of eggs per day.
Mm. Wow. Okay. Yeah, and I think that's important to understand about the shedding and how this is a cycle. And maybe you can talk about why that cycle and this shedding process makes stool testing for parasites so challenging.
Well, part of it really goes back to the type of parasite, and it's really challenging because I've even sent actual liver fluke, textbook liver fluke that the patient brought in, and I opened the manual. You could see it looked just like that. We sent it into the lab, came back negative. I'm like, how is that even possible? So the testing methods, I mean, like threadworm, for example, small intestinal parasite. When you do the research, it shows in research really the only way to diagnose that one is through a biopsy, and nobody does biopsies for parasites. You're not going to diagnose a liver fluke through a stool sample because the liver flukes in the liver, or pancreatic flukes in the pancreas, or lung flukes are in the lung. There's what about babesia, malaria, toxoplasma gondii, all these 70% of them that are more systemic. You're never going to see them necessarily in the bowels. And so I just never had great, having run a bunch of them, never seen great results with what comes back in the stool samples. At times I've seen them, but a lot of times it's like, okay, you have all the symptoms for it. Here's some good herbs that will help your body heal, but also help push these things out. And sure enough, we've seen a lot of them come out.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of these herbal support you believe can affect things on a systemic level. So if someone has a liver fluke, for example, taking something orally is going to help penetrate and essentially remove the parasitic infection that's maybe not in the gut but in other areas of the body.
Yeah, it can definitely help.
Yeah.
And part of that depends on the formulation and the herbs, because different herbs can penetrate the body differently. An example of that is holy basil. Holy basil is known for helping the lungs, also for joint pain and inflammation. So if it's doing that, then it's supporting more systemically the body. And you see that in a couple of my formulas. And then there's other ones that will do the same thing. Or we add the fulvic in there about the carbon molecules to help to drive it further in. And then from there, it just stimulates the immune system to do its job.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, tell us a little bit about the philosophy behind Cellcore in terms of how Cellcore is different from the protocol base to with most supplement companies, right? They might offer herbs individually or they might offer parasitic formulas individually, but Cellcore is much more of a protocol, if you will, right? There's more steps to it. There's more systems that are involved. Can you walk us through why that's different and where that maybe is more impactful?
Sure. So going through the clinical basis of working with a lot of patients, running lots of scans and seeing how the body's impacted. Over the years, I used a bunch of other companies' products. I just wasn't getting the results that I wanted. So eventually, um, started working on my own and then testing with multiple people on okay, what herbs work in good combinations and bringing that together. And then if we started introducing the parasite stuff, so that was the first thing we brought out to the market, and we're having great results. But some people reacted to that, and then we realized, oh, we need to support the body's processes to be able to drain properly. Because if you don't drain properly, you start killing stuff or really start mobilizing or detoxing, then people can get a headache, skin rashes, not feel good, get fatigued, a variety of other Herxheimer reactions. So we created a whole process working with a lot of chronic Lyme disease people, Dr. J and myself, because Dr. J, his wife almost died twice. Was in a coma for 6 weeks when she was 9 from a tick bite and getting Lyme disease. So this is a passion of ours to really help not only myself but also his wife to get better. And a lot of what we figured out is working through those processes. And so what we did is we put together the basis of what people need to be working on to have a great success and supporting their health to get to the next level. And a big part of that is like, oh, you don't want to just throw an herb that is an antibacterial or anti-parasitic herb or a drug. No, what you need to focus on initially is being sure they're going to the bathroom, they're pooping, being sure we get gut bioflow and liver function so that they can detoxify properly without it going the other channels. Meaning that if you don't open up the drainage, then it's going to spill over into the bloodstream with these toxins that then create a lot of these reactions. And so that's our whole process with our protocol is support mitochondrial function and energy. And I'll come back to why. Open up drainage, And then after we get those and start to bind at a low level, start slowly binding and clearing stuff out, and upregulating the body's own ability to do stuff like what you talked about on its own. And then from there, we're cleaning the gut out. We're going to clean out the gut, use the para-1, the mimosa, we use mimosa pudica seed to help grind and bind and clear things out, and then add in some other antiparasitics and continue with drainage and more energy. And then in phase 3, we go further more systemically in that process. So there's a reason why we go through the protocol that we have, because it helps take people through in a way that they're going to have less reactions to, but also have the most success at the end. And when you look at the mitochondrial function, they're like, well, what's the mitochondria? Well, it's the part of the cell that makes energy so that your body can either repair, make enzymes, allow enzymatic reactions to occur, create neurotransmitters, create hormones, detoxify. There's a whole variety of things that it does. It also creates the most pure water that our body and cells need. And then it also modulates the immune function. So outside the cell, the ATP molecules used as an immune signaler say, hey, something's going on here. We need to take care of this. And then it also is a big part of making our hormones and making cortisol so that our bodies can deal with stress. So a lot of the stuff goes through that that process through the mitochondria. And if you look at the tissues and organs and what they require, the amount of mitochondria per cell in your muscles could be 500 to 1,000. Your liver's 2,000, your heart's 5,000, your brain, nervous system's 10,000 mitochondria per cell, on up to 2 million mitochondria per cell in the substantia nigra. So the nervous system has a tremendous amount of energy load that occurs, and that's why if you can upregulate that function, then you're going to be able to have a lot more success at healing everything else.
Yeah, I think that those two pieces are so key, the drainage piece and mitochondria in particular, because as well, what I see is that a lot of people are put on protocols, they're put on herbs, and their they don't have the mitochondrial support for their body, for their immune system to, their immune system doesn't have the support it needs to be able to handle that. They've already got mitochondrial dysfunction going on, and so it just depletes them even further and causes more cellular stress. And so I think that it's so important that drainage piece happens first, because so many people need that level of support. And I'm curious too, because I know with Cellcore that a lot of the formulas contain fulvic acid. And I feel like that's a little bit different than some of your more like traditional herbs, right? Where there isn't fulvic acid. Can you tell us a little bit about what fulvic acid is and how that differs from some other types of support options?
Yeah, so we use fulvic and humic acid, not to be confused with folic acid, which is a vitamin. Fulvic and humic come from the ground. It's ancient soil, and then it's cleaned up and purified. The humic is a larger chain carbon that cleans a lot of things out in the GI system, the gut, and the fulvic is a small chain carbon that can go more systemic. They provide a lot of what we call charged particles. So they have a bunch of functional groups on those molecules that have the ability to bind onto whether it's toxins or metals, or provide the polysaccharides that the cells need for energy, or the charged particles like electrons and protons that are required for many reactions within the body. And it also with the pH, they're not all alike. So if you go out and just buy one, they're not all alike. They're all different. The pHs are different. The functional groups could be different. The amount of ash content and polysaccharides are different. Depends on where you get it from, and the mineral content as well. So I've done a lot of research into this area, and we've, through the years of work that I've done, found the sources that I like and the processes that we use, and it allows for the herbs to go through the digestive system more buffered through because of the lower pH that's in the fulvic, and protects it and be able to allow a higher delivery system throughout the body. But also just a lot of reactions in the body are a redox reaction. So it provides those oxygens or hydrogens that the body needs to allow those reactions to occur. It also helps to provide, like I mentioned earlier, the charged particles, the hydrogens, which is the protons, and the electrons, which are really necessary in detoxification in the liver, also in the mitochondria, and mitochondrial processes, especially in the electron transport chain, where we're making that end molecule of ATP, which is that fuel to allow the body to do its what it's supposed to do, and allow it to have the fuel to get to do what it needs to, and then it has the oxygen that it can donate to be able to then bind that final electron that's a free radical. So it helps to lower the oxidative stress. It helps to bind it in through multiple types of bonding methods to these toxins. And a lot of the problems that aren't necessarily a deficiency as much as the problems are going into where it's a toxicity creating a deficiency.
Yeah. Okay. That's amazing. Thank you. And I know that you mentioned that fulvic is different than fulvic acid, right? And fulvic, is it
Right.
fulvic or is it fulvic acid that's commonly used in animals? I know for, I think, animal detoxification. Is that right?
Yeah, it's fulvic acid.
Okay.
So fulvic or fulvic acid. And the other name is known for is fulvate, meaning that's more in an alkaline form or base form. And so it's what you're getting there. Are you getting more fulvate or getting more fulvic, the acidic part of it? It's great for, we've used it in sources. We've done experiments with bees and had beekeepers where it totally restored the hives to be very healthy from being very, very damaged and toxic, probably because of all the sprays and chemicals that are being used to animals. I've seen experiments with shrimp populations that were depleted and how it helped to upregulate the bacteria and the plankton, fed the plankton with it. And then from there, the shrimp population went up. Um, Animals, trees, a lot of farms. We've seen the farms that use it extensively to get a better plant growth, but also to heal diseased plants as well. And then, of course, in the human body. So it's just a great product that can help sustain our life.
Yeah. So you're saying it's not just humans that these issues happens in, right? It's plants, it's animals of
Right.
all kinds are experiencing parasitic infections and cellular issues and mitochondrial issues and such. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
and thing
yeah,
is, they're all exposed to these toxins that are
yeah,
being put into the environment today, and
yeah.
that's where we have to be able to, um, utilize the right products to clear that out each day.
Yeah, I was at a conference and I was amazed. They were talking about how so much of dog food is just filled with mycotoxins. That all of the like mycotoxins that are the U.S. tests for, I suppose they're using that to make dog food, which is just so incredibly sad. Because I'm sure that that's playing a huge role in illness in dogs.
Yes, as we had a dog here up until recently, she was always on a raw food diet.
Yeah, yeah. It's usually the way to go for them. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the nasal passages in terms of the different options you have. So there's nebulizing, there's nasal rinsing. What is the difference between those, and what does putting a nasal rinse or rinsing fluid that has herbs in our nasal passages do for us?
So the nebulizing is where it takes water. You can put some, as hydrogen peroxide or other solutions in there, and helps to put it into a gaseous form that you breathe in. And that can be really beneficial, especially if somebody's not feeling well and they're sick, or if they're really plugged up and they can't even, can't even do a sinus rinse. Um, the the sinus rinse is where you put, liquid in it. There's several different methods to do it. There's a neti pot where you just pour it in. Then there's a navage, which pushes it in and pulls it out, and then it collects all the stuff. And then Dr. J really likes the Sanya Pulse Elite, where it's a one that you push, you have in there, and it shoots the water in, and you can kind of maneuver it around to try and get that sinus cleared out, and then it comes out the other side. So those are some different methods of doing that. But the rinse is I've used personally, and with clients, gone through and used, whether it's been like a tincture, like a para 3 or one of the IS formulas, that even carboxy powdered and made it into a little liquid, little carboxy in there. Um, which has that fulvic humic to go in and just help clean out the sinuses and push stuff out. So it's one of those things where on its own, saltwater rinses may not do much. It does feel good. It does help to clean things up, but sometimes you have to get a little more aggressive and be a little careful what you put in there. But that's where you work with the practitioner to know what you should rinse with, um, and those things I've seen a lot of parasites come out of people's sinuses.
Yeah, that's
Just
crazy.
gunk as well.
Yeah, that's what I love about the Navage is that you can actually kind of catch it at the bottom and you can see all that gunk that comes out a little bit better.
I've had the Navage. I have the Navage. I've done it live on several lives of people where I demonstrate it
Yeah.
and do it, and yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I love the para 3 in there though. And would you say, that these are things like with the nasal rinses that someone should be doing even on a maintenance perspective with all of these exposures that we're talking about? Or is something like a nasal rinse not a long-term type of support strategy?
Well, I think it's a great support strategy for sure, um, and that's where using a binder in there can help just clear out some of the things that may be going on, and then every so often doing a rinse with the tincture in there.
Okay,
And then
wonderful.
saltwater rinses are just good just to clean stuff out. You've been in an environment, breathing in a ton of dust or breathing in stuff. Just end of the day, clean it out. Like you go and you shower everything off your skin. Go in there and clean stuff off of your sinuses.
hmm Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that is always a bit fearful for people, especially if they have a history of sinus issues. They might be a little bit afraid of doing sinus rinses because of that, but it may be in those populations where it's even more needed based off of what we're talking about with some of the common symptoms that
Yeah,
happen when there are things like mycotoxins and parasites and such up there.
I agree.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit when we were talking about the Cellcore kind of philosophy in terms of how you formulated the products the way you did about mitochondrial function. And I just want to touch on that a little bit deeper because I know that that's such a confusing concept to a lot of patients. They might hear this term thrown around, like, I know what the mitochondria is, but really, how is that affecting me? And how is that playing a role in the way that I feel every day? And you mentioned how it has such a big role in our hormones and our energy, and really all of our hormone function starts there, right? So maybe you could just talk a little bit deeper about how some of these issues of these different exposures that we're coming into contact with, whether it's parasites or mold or environmental chemicals, how are they affecting our mitochondria, and how does that really go into the bigger picture of how people feel every day?
So mold, for example, will go and suppress mitochondrial function, creating a lot of oxidative stress. And there's a pathway known as the NRF2 pathway that mold can suppress, which then is controls the enzymes that bind the free radicals and convert it to water in the mitochondria. So if you don't have those enzymes working well, then you're going to have more free radicals that are causing damage in the mitochondria than a not healthy mitochondria. So mycotoxins are really important to address and to get out of that environment if you're living in there. The other thing is the daily chemicals. Um, it's one of those things where the when people like all those crop dusters that go through crop dust all the cornfields and stuff, but that stuff goes for almost 200 miles away that they find residues um, of that toxin. So like for example, atrazine affects the mitochondria in the electron transport chain, affects complexes 1 through 3. What that means is that you're not going to make the energy you need, and that pushes the energy production back into a system called glycolysis. And so what will happen is then we'll get a buildup of lactic acid, and then you're going to be tired. You're not going to recover so well. You're going to feel maybe some heart palpitations. Uh, there's a variety of things there because now you're not doing aerobic respiration, you're doing anaerobic respiration because you don't have the mitochondrial function working the way you need to that level. So that's where, when you're looking at, say, glyphosate, it's affecting your ability to detox. It's affecting and stopping multiple enzymatic reactions, whether it's in the mitochondria, which there's multiple parts of mitochondria does, glycolysis, making hormones, neurotransmitters, all kinds of um, all kinds of reactions within the body's ability. So it just you're not going to do well. That's why it's important to address those issues. And Dr. J likes to say, like a couple of our binders, like these are multivitamins today because
Mm-hmm.
we're so bombarded with these toxins that then inhibit the reactions, and it doesn't matter how much of the nutrients we take, there's going to be deficiency because of the toxins that are there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. No, I like that. That's a good way to put it, right? Is that maybe it's less about throwing all these like synthetic vitamins into your body and more so about clearing out some of the things that are taking away these nutrients and taking away the ability for your body to work as it should, right?
Yeah, they can bind onto the receptor sites, or they can bind onto and connect bonds with those nutrients as well, and then renders them, basically useless.
Yeah.
So if they can't get to their binding sites to do their role, or they can't, or they are competitive to these toxins, and the toxins went out, then your body's not able to absorb those nutrients the way it needs to.
Yeah, and I think that's where so much of the confusion around hormones comes in is that I think that a lot of times we think about hormones just as the amount of hormones that are like in the system or the amount of hormones that are being made. But we have to remember that in order for those hormones to do anything, they have to actually bind to the receptors that are all throughout our body where they're actually having function, right? So it does you no good to have all these thyroid hormones if they're not actually getting into the cells and tissues that rely on thyroid hormones. And it sounds like what you're saying is that these different toxins are impacting the ability for things like nutrients and hormones to bind as they should.
And that's where we get the term insulin resistance. The
Yeah.
insulin is there, it's just resistant because it can't bind on to the receptor sites. And so if we have insulin resistance, what tells us that we don't have thyroid resistance, or we don't have, any other hormone resistance in the body? I probably do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good explanation. And I think we're learning more and more about the role of even things like insulin resistance and how it drives different chronic disease development. So I know that that's relevant for a lot of listeners. Well, I love Cellcore's products, and I've seen them really transform my own life and patients that I've worked with in the past and currently. And I would just love to learn a little bit more. If you could just share with our listeners where they can learn a little bit more about Cellcore. Do they need to be working with a provider? Just tell us a little bit more about some of those details.
Yes. So Cellcore Biosciences is a practitioner line. And so the best way to get the education on that is through a practitioner, um, like Lauren, um, and you're able to get them from their stores. We don't sell directly to the public, so you'd have to go through a doctor or uh, a licensed practitioner that has the ability to sell them. The other thing is that they can also help educate you through that process of how to do the protocols, or you can buy the protocols through them, and then get the coaching from them, or some of them have group coaching type of methods, one-on-one methods. It depends what your needs are, but ultimately, um, what we found best is that working with a practitioner that's used our products, that's experienced with our products, usually get the best results, because we've had people in the past who would get the products and use the products, but they didn't work up with a practitioner, and then they would end up going back and working with the practitioner so they understood what to take with what, when, why, and a variety of other issues there.
Yeah, and it's so much more than just taking a vitamin or taking a supplement. It's the process of how you take them and why you take them and where you take them when, right? And so I think that's what's really important for people to understand too, that, you really have to know where things going to be needed, where you need extra support, because everyone's case is a little bit different.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Well, what are you most excited about right now? Is there any current research, or I'm sure you can't share with us any projects that are in the works over at Cellcore, but anything that you're currently really excited
Sure.
about or that you want to share with us?
Yes, so I have some formulas I've been working on, or coming out soon with. One is the me support, which you've probably heard of that one. So that's finally going through manufacturing now, finalizing that formula. And another one is an anxiety formula that was also a tincture similar to me support, but more specialized into anxiety and just calming the nervous system. And then we're working on a women's line to really support hormonal optimization and the core nutrients and a kit protocol to do, to support female health. So that's where I'm spending my time right now is working on finishing those products so that we can get them out in the next, I don't know, 4 to 6 months.
Wonderful. We're looking forward to that, and we'll be sure to share with our listeners all about those new products. So thank you so much, Dr. Todd, for your time. I know you're a busy man, and really appreciate all of the information you've shared with us. And I know that anyone that's listening is probably gonna have to go back and re-listen a couple times to some of these more higher level concepts. But I really hope that this helps provide our listeners, those of you that are listening today, with just some of the more nuanced complexities of what you really do need to know about what's going on with your health, that maybe hasn't been uncovered for you so far. So thank you again.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me on. I hope you have a wonderful day.
You too.